My fiancée messaged me. I'm meeting my ex for dinner. It's only for closure. Don't get jealous. I replied, enjoy. Then I went ahead and called off the wedding and shut down her credit card. By the next morning, I had 35 missed calls from her and her family. My name is Roger. I am 34 and I work as a civil engineer in Rotterdam. My days are structured and predictable. I manage infrastructure projects for the municipality, mostly bridge maintenance and flood control. It is steady work with long planning cycles and very little drama. I own a small apartment near the river and I am careful with money. I grew up watching my parents argue about debt, so I avoid financial chaos whenever possible. My fiancée is Qley. She is 31 and works in marketing for a mid-sized fashion brand. We have been together for 3 years and engaged for 8 months. We are supposed to get married this September. We do not live together yet, but we share wedding deposits and a joint credit card strictly for venue payments, catering, and related costs. Qley is outspoken. That was part of what attracted me to her in the beginning. She says exactly what she thinks, even when it is unnecessary. Over time, that trait has become less charming and more sharp-edged. She tends to frame impulsive decisions as empowerment and anyone who questions her as insecure. Last Thursday at 1840, while I was still at my desk reviewing drainage schematics, I got a message from her. She wrote that she was meeting her ex for dinner and that it was only for closure. She added that I should not get jealous. There was no lead-up, no conversation earlier in the day, just that message. For context, this ex was not distant history. They broke up a few months before she met me. She has described him as emotionally unavailable and unreliable. She has also referenced him during arguments, usually as a comparison point for how I respond to conflict. I read her message twice. What stood out was not the dinner itself. It was the instruction not to get jealous. That told me she anticipated the reaction and decided to manage it in advance instead of discussing it like an adult. I replied with one word: enjoy. Then I opened our banking app. For clarity, the joint credit card is in my name. Qley is an authorized user. We set it up specifically for wedding logistics so we could track deposits and vendor balances in one place. The venue alone required a significant advance payment, and I wanted transparency on everything. When I opened the banking app, I did not act out of anger. I looked at the outstanding balances and the upcoming scheduled payments. The catering installment was due in 10 days. The final venue transfer was set for next month. Together, they represented a large financial commitment. I thought about the timing. We were less than 4 months from the wedding. Invitations had gone out. Flights were booked by relatives. Her meeting her ex for closure was not something that should be happening at this stage unless there was unfinished emotional business. And if there was unfinished emotional business, I did not want to be legally binding myself to it. I disabled the credit card. It takes less than a minute in the app. I did not cancel it outright. I froze it so no new transactions could go through. Then I drafted an email to the venue requesting a pause on further payments pending a personal matter. I did not give details. I simply asked about the cancellation policy and potential penalties. After that, I called my older sister. She is practical and not dramatic. I explained the situation exactly as it happened. Her response was simple. If she needs closure from another man days before committing to you for life, you are not her first choice. That sentence settled something in me. Around 21:15, Qley texted again. She said dinner was going well and that I should relax. She added a smiling emoji. I did not respond. By 23:48, I received another message. She wrote that they talked about their past, and she felt lighter. She said this was healthy and mature and that I would benefit from trusting her more. There was still no acknowledgement that this might reasonably bother me. At 0:02, I sent one message. I canceled the wedding. Then I turned my phone on silent and went to sleep. I woke up at 6:30 like I do every weekday. I keep my phone on the dresser across the room, so I have to physically get up to turn off the alarm. When I picked it up, the screen was lit with notifications. 35 missed calls. Most were from Qley. The rest were from her mother, her younger brother, and 2 numbers I recognized as her close friends. There were also a string of messages, escalating in tone as the night went on. The first few from Qley were indignant. She wrote that I was being dramatic and that canceling the wedding over dinner was unhinged. She said I was trying to punish her for being emotionally mature. Around 1 o'clock, the messages shifted. She demanded that I reactivate the credit card immediately because she had just tried to pay a photographer installment and it declined. That confirmed something important. She had been actively moving forward with payments while having dinner with her ex. By 2:15, her tone changed again. She asked if I was serious. She said we needed to talk face to face. At 3 o'clock, she called me controlling. At 4:10, she said I was embarrassing her in front of vendors. At 5:30, she sent a final message saying her mother was furious and that I had no right to make unilateral decisions. I made coffee and read everything twice before responding to anyone. I did not call her back immediately. I first logged into the venue portal and formally submitted a cancellation request. There was a penalty, but it was manageable. Because the contract is under my name, the communication had to come from me. That was intentional from the beginning. I handle legal documents carefully. At 7:15, I sent one message to Qley. The wedding is canceled. The card is frozen. We will meet today at 1800 hours in a public place to discuss returning deposits and personal items. I did not justify myself. I did not argue. I gave logistics. Within 2 minutes, my phone started ringing again. I did not pick up when she called. I wanted the first real conversation to be controlled and in person, not a shouting match at 7 in the morning while I was trying to get dressed for work. At 7:32, she sent a voice message instead. I did not play it immediately. I prefer text because it forces clarity. But the transcription preview showed enough. She said I was humiliating her and acting insecure over nothing. She repeated that it was only closure and that adults are allowed to have conversations with their past. What she did not address was timing. Closure is something you pursue before accepting a proposal, not 4 months before a wedding with deposits paid and families involved. Her mother called next. I answered that one. She opened with "How dare you?" No greeting. No question. She said Qley was devastated and that I was sabotaging my own future over jealousy. I listened without interrupting. When she paused for breath, I explained calmly that I was not comfortable marrying someone who felt the need to have dinner with an ex for emotional resolution at this stage. She responded that I was being controlling and dramatic. I said this is not about control. This is about standards. Then I ended the call. At work, I informed my manager that I might need a personal day the following week to handle some private matters. He did not ask for details. I have a reputation for being steady. That helps in moments like this. Around 10 o'clock, Qley sent a longer message. She said I was proving her point about my insecurity. She wrote that her ex had matured and apologized for how he treated her, and that she deserved that conversation. She added that my reaction showed I did not trust her. I replied once. Trust is not blind approval of questionable decisions. It is mutual respect. You did not ask. You informed. There was a pause after that. Then she wrote that I was twisting the narrative and making her look like the villain. She said I was punishing her for being honest. I did not respond again. We had agreed to meet at 1800 hours. I intended to keep that boundary. We met at a cafe near Block Station. Public, neutral, easy to leave from either side. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table near the window. I wanted visibility and a clear exit. Qley walked in at exactly 18:07. She did not sit immediately. She stood across from me with her arms folded and said, "I cannot believe you actually did this." People were looking, so I gestured to the chair and told her to sit down. She started with volume. She said I blindsided her. She said canceling the wedding without discussion was cruel and impulsive. I let her finish. Then I asked a single question. Why did you feel the need to have dinner with him now? She rolled her eyes. She said because I needed closure and I am not going to apologize for doing something healthy. She emphasized healthy like I was too primitive to understand the concept. I asked why that closure could not have happened 3 years ago, or before you said yes to my proposal, or at any point before deposits were paid. She said timing is irrelevant. Emotional growth does not follow a calendar. That is when the dynamic became clear. To her, the relationship was flexible, something that could absorb any decision she made as long as she labeled it mature. To me, engagement is a commitment that narrows certain options out of respect. I explained that my issue was not jealousy. If she had told me months ago that she wanted to process unresolved feelings, we could have had a conversation. But informing me hours before dinner and instructing me not to get jealous felt dismissive. She laughed. Actually laughed. She said, "You are proving you are insecure by reacting like this." I told her calmly that I do not compete for emotional priority. If she needed validation from an ex to move forward, then she was not fully forward with me. Her expression shifted slightly at that. For the first time, she seemed unsure. Then she said something that confirmed my decision. She said, "You were supposed to fight for us, not just walk away." When she said I was supposed to fight for us, I asked her what that actually meant. She said it meant pushing back, getting angry, demanding she cancel dinner, showing passion instead of shutting things down. She framed my decision as cold detachment, like I failed some emotional test she never told me about. I told her I do not audition for stability. If someone tests loyalty by creating insecurity, that is not something I participate in. She leaned back and said, "This is exactly what I mean. You are so rigid. Relationships are messy. You cannot just apply engineering logic to feelings." I work in engineering, yes. I assess risk. I build contingencies. I do not ignore warning signs because something is emotionally complicated. I explained that canceling the wedding was not about punishing her. It was about alignment. We clearly have different definitions of commitment. She believes engagement still allows emotional loose ends to be explored. I do not. She asked if I thought she cheated. I said that is not the point. Trust is not only about physical boundaries. It is about priority. When you schedule dinner with an ex and instruct your fiancé not to get jealous, you are positioning his reaction as the problem, not your decision. She went quiet for a moment. Then she pivoted. She said her ex had told her he regretted losing her. She admitted that hearing that felt validating. She said it made her realize how much she had grown. Then she quickly added that it did not mean she wanted him back. That detail mattered more than she understood. I told her that validation from a former partner days before a wedding is not neutral. It introduces comparison, and comparison erodes clarity. She said I was overanalyzing. She said she chose me, so what was the issue? I told her choosing me should not require ongoing evaluation against someone else. At that point, she changed tone again. Softer. She said we could fix this. She asked me to unfreeze the card and reinstate the wedding while we talk things through. I shook my head. Financial commitments are not leverage. Once I made the decision, I followed it through. Her face hardened. She said, "You are really going to throw away 3 years over one dinner?" I told her it was not about one dinner. It was about what the dinner represented. 3 years together is not erased by a single event, but it can be clarified by one. Major decisions reveal priorities. They expose how someone weighs risk and respect. She said I was dramatizing a normal situation. She insisted that adults can have contact with ex-partners without it meaning anything. She said I was living in some outdated rulebook. I agreed that adults can speak to former partners. But adults who are 4 months away from a wedding usually discuss that decision beforehand. They do not announce it hours before and attach instructions about how their fiancé should feel. She accused me of wanting control. I corrected her. I want predictability and mutual consideration. If she had said she was uncomfortable with me having dinner with a former girlfriend days before our wedding, I would not have done it. Not because I am controlled, but because I prioritize the relationship. She went quiet again. Then she shifted strategy. She said maybe she handled it badly. She admitted that telling me not to get jealous was dismissive. But she said my reaction was extreme. She asked if I had already been looking for an excuse. That question told me she still did not understand. I explained that I am not reactive. I am decisive. When I see a structural crack in a foundation, I do not wait for the building to collapse. I address it. She looked frustrated. She said relationships require forgiveness. I said forgiveness applies to mistakes. This was not a mistake. It was a choice. She then said something that changed the temperature completely. She said, "You are going to regret this when you realize no one else will put up with how emotionally distant you are." That was not grief. That was ego. I stood up. I told her we would settle the remaining deposits according to what is refundable. I would transfer her share of any returned funds. Personal items could be exchanged through a mutual friend if needed. She did not follow me immediately. But as I reached the door, she said, "You will hear from my father about this." I said that is fine. And I left. The next morning, before I even got out of bed, I blocked her. Phone number first, then messaging apps, then social media. I did not do it out of anger. I did it to prevent escalation. After a clear decision, prolonged communication only creates opportunities for manipulation or emotional bargaining. Within minutes of blocking her, I started receiving calls from unknown numbers. I let them ring. Then came emails. The first was from Qley. Subject line simply said, "Please." She wrote that I was being extreme and that blocking her proved I could not handle adult conflict. She said couples fight and recover. She said I was abandoning her over pride. I did not respond. The second email was longer. She shifted tone again. She wrote that her father was disappointed in me, that I had embarrassed their family, that guests were already asking questions. She implied that I was responsible for reputational damage. That told me something important. Her primary concern was perception. Around midday, her father called from his office line. I answered that one out of courtesy. He spoke calmly, unlike her mother. He asked if I understood the financial implications of canceling a wedding this close to the date. I told him yes. I had already reviewed the contracts. The penalties were acceptable to me. He then said Qley was emotional and that perhaps I had overreacted. He suggested we take a week to cool down before making irreversible decisions. I explained that the irreversible decision happened when Qley chose to seek emotional validation from her ex days before committing to marriage. My response was a boundary, not a tantrum. He was silent for a moment. Then he said he hoped I would reconsider. I told him I would not. After that call, I blocked his number too. I spent the afternoon contacting vendors. Photographer, caterer, florist. Each conversation was professional. Some deposits were non-refundable. I accepted that. Peace of mind has a cost. By evening, I transferred Qley her portion of the refundable amounts. I included a simple note in the transfer description. Settlement complete. No message. No explanation. Clean lines. For the first time since Thursday night, my phone was quiet. I assumed things would taper off after the financial settlement. I was wrong. 2 days later, a mutual friend texted me. He asked what happened because Qley was telling people I had a breakdown and canceled the wedding out of nowhere. According to her version, I could not handle that she maintained healthy boundaries with past relationships. That framing was strategic. I replied with a concise summary. She informed me she was having dinner with her ex for closure 4 months before our wedding and instructed me not to get jealous. I chose not to proceed with the marriage. That was it. He responded with one sentence. That sounds different from what she said. I did not pursue it further. I am not interested in narrative wars. People who know me understand my temperament. Later that evening, Qley tried contacting me through a new email address. The tone had changed again. This time it was reflective. She said she felt like I punished her for being honest. She admitted she enjoyed hearing her ex say he regretted losing her. She said it made her question whether she had rushed into engagement. That line stood out, not because it hurt, because it confirmed the underlying issue. If you are questioning whether you rushed into engagement, you do that privately before accepting a proposal. You do not explore it through dinner conversations with the person you used to date. She ended the email by saying she never intended to lose me and that she thought I would fight harder. There it was again. The expectation that love equals endurance. That commitment equals tolerating destabilizing behavior to prove devotion. I did not reply. Instead, I packed the few things she had left at my apartment into a small box. A spare jacket, a book, some toiletries. I dropped it off with the mutual friend who had texted me earlier. No note attached. By the end of the week, the silence was complete. No more unknown numbers. No more emails. Just quiet. It has been 3 months. The venue refunded part of the deposit. The catering kept theirs. Financially, I absorbed the loss without issue. I adjusted my savings plan and moved on. Logistically, everything was resolved within 2 weeks. Emotionally, it was simpler than I expected. People have asked if I regret acting quickly. The honest answer is no. If anything, I am relieved the fault line appeared before legal paperwork and shared property were involved. Looking back, the dinner was not the first signal. It was just the clearest one. Qley often framed challenges as tests. If I did not react with enough intensity, she questioned my depth. If I reacted too firmly, she called me rigid. The standard moved depending on what validated her in the moment. The message about closure was consistent with that pattern. It positioned me in a defensive role before I had even responded. Do not get jealous implied that jealousy would be irrational. That left no room for reasonable concern. Marriage requires shared definitions, shared boundaries, shared assumptions about what is appropriate without negotiation. We did not have that. About a month ago, I ran into a colleague who had heard the wedding was canceled. He asked if there was a dramatic story. I told him no. There was a misalignment discovered at the right time. That is still how I see it. I have not unblocked her. There has been no final conversation, no attempt at friendship. Clean breaks are cleaner for a reason. If she wanted validation from her past before committing to a future, she is free to pursue that path fully. I prefer partnerships where commitment does not require performance. The night she texted that she was meeting her ex and told me not to get jealous, she probably expected an argument. Maybe raised voices. Maybe a grand gesture. Instead, she got clarity. And clarity does not negotiate.
Using their time, their talent, and their network to achieve what had never been done before. and that was to convince an individual state to undertake drug development to create a therapeutic medical breakthrough for public health crises within its borders that are representative of the national reality. After you released the interview with us on January 2nd, 2025, we pursued a 5.5-month blistering campaign to convince 188 blank slate Texas legislators to fund the single largest psychedelic research and medical development project in history, that being the $50 million Texas Ibogaine Initiative. We had the assistance of some in-state allies, one of which was Texans for Greater Mental Health, led by a dear friend and brother of mine, Logan Davidson, who was my right hand, going to meet with legislators continuously while I set up shop at a hotel here in Halston and lived here just about part-time, wearing the shoe leather off, sweating, and making sure that everybody who needed to be introduced, educated, and motivated to get behind this would do so. At the end of this 5.5 months, we secured the votes of yes of 181 out of 188 legislators between the Texas House of Representatives and State Senate. There was one individual who we had to persuade at the 11th hour to get behind this project. On May the 14th, 2025, just 36 hours before the Texas budget was finalized, this bill that would create the first unified FDA drug development trial with Ibogaine in U.S. history was not funded. I woke up that morning, and I believe very much in keeping your prayers in the closet, as Jesus taught, and not getting out there parading about it. But on that morning, I got a call, and it was, hey, we're getting to the 11th hour. We don't have money to secure this. It may not make it. We've done everything that we can. And I literally got down on my hands and knees and said, God, please let this happen. And if it cannot happen, help me understand why. 3 hours later, I got a telephone call asking if I could go and meet with the Texas House Speaker and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. I went at 4:30 in the afternoon on May the 14th and spent an hour with these two gentlemen going back and forth about what this project was, why it was so existentially necessary for Texas and the country. And on Friday morning, May the 16th at 10 a.m., we got a text message from Lieutenant Governor Patrick confirming that he would approve and fully fund the Texas Ibogaine Initiative. As we walk in here today, literally, just 10 minutes before we walked into your studio, I can confirm that the great state of Texas is going to fully fund the Texas Ibogaine Initiative, originally intended to be a public-private partnership, but now has decided on its own to commit a full $100 million to launch the development of Ibogaine all the way through the FDA's drug development process for the benefit of the American people. To do so on its own, without any drug development partner, and to do it for the good of humanity.
That's phenomenal. So what did you have to say to Dan Patrick to convince him of this? And kudos to him for doing this.
Well, I had some very wonderful advocates